I see sometimes floating around on F1 social media is that Charles Leclerc could be the next Daniel Ricciardo. Now this is something that I personally do not believe, but here's a thought I have had on and off for a while. Is Leclerc and Ferrari the new Raikkonen and McLaren? Let's speak about it. As always, like and subscribe if you want to enjoy the video, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Kimi Raikkonen joined McLaren at the start of his second season in the sport in 2002 after making his debut in 2001 with Sauber, where he finished 10th in the championship on 9 points. As for his first season at McLaren, Kimi would score a podium on McLaren's debut with P3, and he'd score 3 more podiums that year in the Nürburgring, France and Japan. But in the 17 races run that year, he retired in 11 of them. One he spun off, another was as a result of collision damage, one was a wheel hub failing, another the rear wing failing, but the other 7 were all mechanical related retirement. Which is going to be a trend because McLaren's cars at this time were questionable at best in terms of reliability. 2003 saw better fortunes for the Finn, with only 2 retirements and only one was mechanical, the other was via collision. He even finally took his first race win at the second race in Malaysia, where according to at the time McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, Raikkonen, when McLaren were trying to get him to slow down a bit because he had a massive lead and could afford to back half a pure touch, shouted on the radio, "Stop talking, I know what I'm fucking doing." That's not the last time we'd hear the Finn say something like that. But that was Kimi's only win in 03, but his slew of second place finishes across the rest of the season kept him right there as a challenger to Michael Schumacher for the championship, and finishing second in the end on 91 points. Agonizingly close to taking the title, but missing out by just a matter of points. Then 2004 came around. And as was classic for McLaren at the time, the car was questionable at best. I mean, in the first 7 races, Raikkonen only had 2 race finishes, and only one of those was a points finish, or rather a point finish in San Marino. The other 6, one of them he finished 11th, that was Barcelona, but Australia, Malaysia, Bahrain, Monaco, and the Nürburgring, he retired in every single one of them. It was that bad for McLaren. The journalist Bob McKenzie said that if McLaren won a race that year, he'd run a lap of Silverstone naked. We'll admit a sea of 8 retirements, although one of which can be put down to mechanical. Kimi did get a win that year at the Belgian Grand Prix. And that would be one of only 4 podiums he would score that year, all 4 coming in the final 8 rounds of the year, which was by far McLaren's best part of the year, the end of the season, on his way to 7th in the championship on 45 points. 2005 would be better, but in a sense that it was kind of a repeat of 2003, just with mirror race wins, 7 in total, the last of which was his insane 17th to 1st drive in Suzuka, which I've done a video on a couple of years ago. And he also scored 3 additional podiums beyond that, one of which was a 3rd place at the British Grand Prix, where Bob McKenzie held up his end of the bet he made in 2004 and ran a lap at Silverstone more or less naked. Honestly, mad respect to the guy for actually following through. But all that added up to 2nd in the championship to Fernando Alonso, and Kimi not taking the title was down to factors outside of the Finn's control. At the Nürburgring, while leading late in the race, there was some concerns about his tires, which were completely buggered and could fail at any moment. Please note, you weren't allowed to change tires during the race in 2005 unless it was a safety concern. But because he was leading, and also, because of the rules, McLaren stuck it out to the end. You can probably figure this out by the fact I'm mentioning it here, but it didn't exactly work out. And after starting the final lap of the race, Kimi's tire failed, and it sent him from staring at a race win to out of the race. That wasn't the only time he retired while leading this year. He had a drive shaft failure at Imola while leading, and he had an engine failure at the Hockenheim ring while leading. And all 3 of those races ended up being won by Alonso instead, who won the title on 133 points while Kimi missed out by 21 points. Oh, then there was also the United States Grand Prix that he and all the other Michelin drivers didn't even start, but moving on. Raikkonen would go winless throughout 2006, but he did score 6 podiums with the team on his way to 5th in the championship on 65 points. He also retired 6 times, so, typical McLaren in the mid-2000s, I guess. That was his last season at the Woking team though, as he would jump ship to Maranello for 2007, where he'd capitalise on the McLaren drivers acting like petulant children and getting stuck in gravel traps on the pit entry because his tyres were completely shafted, to come out on top and finally win the championship. So to sum up, 2 second place finishes in the Drivers' Championship, 9 wins, 30 podiums, 11 poles, 19 fastest laps, and a total of 337 points scored, but also 32 retirements / non-starts from 88 races, the majority of which were arguably caused by no fault of his own. Kimi Raikkonen's time at McLaren can be put down to a bucket load of talent and speed. Honestly, back in the early mid-2000s, Kimi was one of the best drivers on the grid, but he had a lot of questionable cars, bad luck, a lot of retirements, and lost chances from factors outside of his control. And I'm gonna be honest, all this sounds a pretty bit familiar about a certain Monegasque, which you'll see as we now move on to Charles Leclerc. Like Raikkonen, Leclerc debuted in F1 in 2018 with Sauber, finishing 13th on 39 points before getting the call up to Ferrari for his second season in 2019. And that first season in raid was fairly successful, with 4th in the championship on 264 points, ahead of his 4-time world champion teammate Sebastian Vettel, which is nothing to sneeze at. What's also not to sneeze at is the 10 podiums he scored, 12 of which were a pair of wins at the Belgian and Italian Grand Prix to mark Ferrari's first home win in 9 years. He could have had more wins this year if luck, or rather lack thereof, hadn't gotten involved. Let's run through it. Bahrain. Leclerc starts for pole and is leading by 10 seconds or so with 15 laps to go, looking set to take his first win just 2 races into his Ferrari career, but then came the radio call that would start the trend of Leclerc fans having a mini heart attack whenever they see Leclerc's radio graphic pop up on the broadcast.
There's something strange with the engine.
Okay, copy that, we are checking it.
There's something strange with the engine.
He ended up falling back to P3, missing out on what was an almost guaranteed win. Austria. Leclerc takes pole again and has a good handle on the race, looking like again he could be set for his first win, but then Max Verstappen happened and he was bumped off while the Dutchman passed him at turn 3. Okay, you could argue this one wasn't as much a bad luck, but moving on. In Singapore, he got undercut by his teammate after taking pole. In Mexico, he got the short end of the strategy stick after taking pole for not the last time in his career. And not to mention, back in Monaco, he ended up out in Q1 after the team didn't send him out for a final run, thinking he was safe and, I believe, wanting to save tires. They save tires, alright. All the sex videos in Q2 and 3. I hate to yet mention that later in 2019 also brought on that whole Ferrari engine controversy, which I am not getting into because it's not the point here, but the fallout of all that would end up really affecting Ferrari throughout 2020. A long story short, the car was crap. They had their worst Constructors' Championship finish in 40 years with 6th, and Leclerc only managed 8th in the Drivers' Championship on 98 points. Did still manage 12 podiums though in the season opener in Austria and at round 4 in Silverstone, but it has to be said that, no taking off his talent, it was very much a case of right place, right time, and capitalizing on the misfortune of others. I mean, come on, I mind seeing a stat that while Leclerc had 2 podiums in the first 4 races of 2020, Kevin Magnussen in that 4-race span raced more laps in the top 3 than Leclerc did. He got a bit screwed this season with a bad car, and this ain't gonna be the last time that that's a factor. That led to some not so good results. He had 4 retirements, one of which being out of his control in Barcelona, and the rest were all from collisions and crashing. 2021 would be better in terms of results, but it would not be better in terms of luck. The amount of bad luck he had this year, my god, it was painful. If Leclerc didn't have bad luck in 2021, he didn't have any. Let's run through it. Round 2, Imola. Charles is running a very comfortable P3, which becomes P2 when Hamilton goes off, and with about half the race to go, he's looking good to score a podium. Until there's a red flag for Russell and Bottas crashing, and when the race restarts, 1, he has radio issues if I remember correctly, and 2, he gets passed by Norris and then Hamilton as well, and ends up in P4. Round 5, Monaco. After the first runs of Q3, he set provisional pole. And now, yes, him crashing it during the final runs was his fault. He's got fault here. He's the one who crashed. But what wasn't his fault was Ferrari failing to check the car properly when they fixed it because the left drive shaft was broken, which wasn't the side the collision was on, which is perhaps how they missed it, but Jesus, Ferrari. All this translated to him not even starting the race he'd been due to start from pole for. Round 10, Silverstone. This is his one and only podium of this season, and he led the first about 50 laps of it after Hamilton and Verstappen played bumper cars at Cops on the opening lap. Now the bad luck here came in the form of some small engine issues at mid-race, some small engine cuts while leading, and while we of course don't know if without them he could have been a bit further ahead and kept Hamilton behind later on, you have to imagine he might have, or maybe he wouldn't have because Hamilton was bloody quick, but it fits the bill of bad luck with the engine cut, so I'm mentioning it. Round 11, Hungary. After a wet start, Lance Stroll sees Bottas's game of bowling up front and decides to play his own game of bowling and went right into the side of Leclerc's car at turn 1. Race over. Round 15, Russia. The weather went from 0 to 100 very quickly late in the race and he ended up on the short end of the stick when it came to pitting for inters as his teammate was ahead. Why Ferrari didn't double stack is freaking beyond me. Round 20, Qatar. It's discovered that after he's knocked down Q2, his chassis is cracked. Not sure how that happened, if it was his fault or not, but I'm gonna mention it anyway. Round 21, Saudi Arabia. After he pits when the safety car comes out for Mick Schumacher bidding it where Leclerc binned it in practice, the safety car becomes a red flag, giving everyone he lost places to when he stopped a free pit stop in the race. Round 22, Abu Dhabi. While him taking a trip off the track during the race didn't help things, he kind of just then ended up on a bit of a short stick in terms of strategy, which culminated in him finishing 7th in the Drivers' Championship, only 5 or so points off 5th, which is the position he'd been in coming into the race. All over 2021 is also kind of making the point of the points total and final positions in the standings don't tell the whole story. And yes, while Sainz had a solid first season at Ferrari, Leclerc got so unlucky, and without the crap luck, you'd have to imagine he'd have beaten his teammate in 2021. That was also the so far only time in his single-seater racing career where Leclerc has been beaten by a teammate in final championship standings. For 2022, there was new regulations in place, and I remember there being a lot of expectation on Ferrari coming into this season. Expectation that they were gonna be up there, and it seemed off the start Ferrari were living up to that expectation, and we could have a Verstappen v Leclerc championship fight. But then after the first few rounds, where Leclerc had garnered a lead rivaling Rosberg's lead after the first few races of 2016, Ferrari started Ferrarying. While he did make mistakes this year too in Imola and France, so much happened to him again that was out of his control. 2 mechanical DNFs from the lead in Barcelona and Baku, the first of which you'd have to imagine was a nailed-on win for him. He was looking set for a second Grand Slam of the year and of his career. There was a couple occasions of Ferrari shitting the bed on strategy in Hungary, Monaco somehow turning P1 to P4 in changeable conditions, in Silverstone when the safety car came out late in the race and they for some reason left him out while the others behind him pitted, and instead of winning he finished P4. That one is one of the times where I greatly question why Ferrari didn't have a 1-2 strategy in place. They should have by that point of the season. They should have, but they didn't. But moving on. In Belgium, he got tear-off stuck on one of his brake ducts, I believe it was, and he had to pit to get it removed. That then burned a sensor and he got a 5-second time penalty for speeding in the pit lane, but by the by. In Brazil Q3, Ferrari sent him out on inters when it wasn't raining. Genius move, Ferrari. Not to mention getting a poor start in Imola because of the stuff that covered the old finish line, which ran through his grid spot. That was rather slippery. Like, I swear to God, Ferrari effed this season so much. But all that put a kibosh on his championship hopes, and he ended up finishing second on 308 points, only just beating Sergio Perez. Again, why Ferrari did not implement a 1-2 strategy with their drivers when they should have, I will never know. 2023 was not as good for him as yes, F23, while not terrible, it wasn't great, especially early on. A mechanical DNF in Bahrain, a collision with Stroll at turn 3 in Australia, something or another not working on the car in Barcelona that sent him to start P19 and only finish P11 at disqualification in the USA for plank wear, and also a crap strategy after starting from pole because Ferrari for some reason thought a one-stop would be a good idea. A second DNS in Brazil, a poorly timed safety car in Las Vegas. Though he took 6 podiums this year, he only managed 5th in the championship on 206 points. Last year, 2024, was a bit better for Charles. Well, frankly, I'd say it was probably his best season to date. The run from Canada to Silverstone was really bad in the span of those 4 races. He only had 1 point finish in Barcelona, but the rest of that year made up for it with a total of 13 podiums, most he's taken in a season, and 3 of them race wins. One being at the US Grand Prix after making a brilliant start going from 4th to 1st at the first turn. A second being his second home win at the Italian Grand Prix after a tyre management masterclass when Ferrari opted not to pit for a second time, and it worked. And the remaining win, of course, being his emotional first home win at the Monaco Grand Prix. He missed second in the championship by 18 points, but third on 356 points, the most he scored in a season, is still a solid result. And aside from finishing finishing one position lower than his best, 2024 has been his best season so far, as I said, especially after the summer break, which is where most of his success came. For once, there was definitely a lot less bad luck for him this year than there had been in previous years. But now pivoting to this year, 2025, it's not been as good. He's once again been struck with a car that is questionable at best and crap at worst. Disqualification for Wade to the car in China, strategy gamble that didn't pay off in Silverstone and then just no pace, crashed out by Antonelli in Zandvoort, no pace in Baku, not to mention having to do so much Lyco so often it's ridiculous. All for the brakes, for plank wear because Ferrari can't run the car too low without being disqualified, as we discovered in China. Oh, and on that, let's not forget Hungary, where after taking a surprise pole and being fine early on, he ended up slipping backwards later on due to, I think, some changes that were made at the pit stop. So yeah, after a 2024 where there was perhaps a bit less bad luck, it's come back with a vengeance. So again, to sum up, 12 top 3 finishes in the Drivers' Championship, 8 wins, 50 podiums, 27 poles, 10 fastest laps, 6 sprint race podiums, 1 sprint race pole, and a total of 1,601 points scored so far with Ferrari. But also some retirements and so much bad luck and lost wins and lost podiums through no fault of his own. People love to pull up the pole to win conversion rate stat for Charles, but when they do, they fail to mention that most of the times he's failed to convert pole to a win are for reasons that are not his fault. Like Raikkonen and McLaren, Leclerc's time at Ferrari can be summed up with so much talent, a lot of speed and potential, but also a lot of bad luck and several cars that are questionable at best. I suppose the main difference is that Leclerc's bad luck is coming more in the form of questionable strategies and less in mechanical DNFs, but those have been there. But you see my point here with these two? Raikkonen ended up having to leave McLaren and head to Ferrari to finally get that championship. Perhaps for Leclerc it's the other way around. Maybe he needs to leave Ferrari and head to McLaren. I mean, 1, they're the best team right now, and 2, there's been a lot of talk going around of could Piastri go to Ferrari, and also the talk of could Leclerc leave Ferrari if 2026 doesn't give. Might those two just do a direct swap? Walk-ins. But do you think Leclerc and Ferrari are the new Raikkonen and McLaren? And if he does end up leaving Ferrari, which team do you see as Charles' most likely landing destination? Let me get your thoughts and do it in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.